Hey guys, so I had assigned a Khan Academy video for you all to watch to actually fill in your Constitutional Convention notes, and that wasn't working for a lot of people, so I went ahead and just created this video to help you fill in your notes and make sure that you have what you need. So as I'm gonna go through this, and as I go through it, I'm gonna tell you to pause and actually write in the notes that are on the screen. So you can pause, write in the notes, and then play, and then you can listen to me actually explain some of the notes so that you understand what you're writing down and you're not just writing it down without understanding. So make sure that you actually are listening, and you just go ahead and pause the video when I tell you to so you can write the stuff down and then listen to me. So, we are now talking about the Constitution and how we get from the Articles of Confederation, which were really weak and had all these terrible weaknesses and problems that made it very difficult for our government to function, to now the Constitution that we have today. And so, this whole Constitution comes about in the Constitutional Convention of 1787. And under our Constitution, we have shared power between the national government and the states. Now, this is federalism. In the Articles of Confederation, we had a confederation where the states had all the power and the central government had very, very little power. Now, power is shared so that it is a federal form of government. And there's also a system for change, whereas in the Articles of Confederation, all 13 states had to approve any kind of amendment. Now we have a better system for actually changing our Constitution through amendment, so it has adapted with us over time. So, if you're looking at your notes, you have key issues and their resolutions. And on the left-hand side, you'll see problems or issues at the convention. So the first problem is that there's a disagreement between large and small states over power or representation in Congress. Okay, our solution, so you can go ahead and pause and write down this as our solution right here. This whole area right here is our solution. You can go ahead, pause, write it down, and then push play. Okay, so you should have already written down this in your chart. Now, what this actually means is that in order to balance power between large and small states, they create a bicameral legislature. Okay, that means 2 houses. They're going to create this, and there's going to be an upper house, which is the Senate, and that is going to have equal representation. You'll see each state has 2 senators. That's what equal representation means. And this is going to be what gets the small states on board. They're like, okay, we have an upper house that has equal representation. That's good. But the large states are going to be like, but what about us? We have more people, so we should have more representation. So then they created a lower house, the House of Representatives. And this is all based on population. So if you have more people, you have more representatives. It's pretty self-explanatory. This whole resolution is called the Great Compromise. So you'll notice down at the bottom of your notes you have the Virginia Plan, the New Jersey Plan, and the Great Compromise. So you'll actually, at the end, we'll get to a slide that covers that and kind of how did they actually get to this whole resolution in the first place. We'll get to that down there. But just so you know, this is called the Great Compromise. Alright, issue number 2. There was disagreement between northern and southern states over who should be counted when deciding representation in the House of Representatives. So, in your box, the solution box, this is what you're going to write right here, this text. This is the 3/5 compromise. So go ahead, pause it, write in your text, and then push play. Okay, so you should already have your box filled in there with this information. And just to kind of give you an explanation of the 3/5 compromise. Basically, this disagreement was between the northern states that did not have slaves and then the southern states who did have slaves. And the northern states were like, okay, they're slaves, you're not counting them, you're counting them as your property, you're not treating them as people, so they shouldn't be counted as part of your population. But the southern states are like, no, they should be counted as population because they are people living in our states. So in order to kind of reach an agreement, they meet sort of in the middle. So what they do is they're pleasing the southern states by saying that 3 out of 5 slaves will be counted towards their population when they're calculating how many representatives they should have in the House of Representatives. This is called the 3/5 compromise. And so what you'll do is, if you're a southern state, in order to figure out your overall population when they're trying to decide how many representatives you'll have, they count all the free people plus 3/5 of other persons. And when they say other persons in the Constitution, what they're referring to are slaves. All right, issue number 3. So this is kind of an issue that we have with the Articles of Confederation. The states had way too much power under the Articles of Confederation. So what they're going to do to make that a change, they actually are going to make federal law supreme. So go ahead and pause the video and fill in this information up here into your solution box. Okay, you should have already filled this in your solution box. So just to explain this, basically, they want to make sure that the states still have lots of power. So what they'll do is they will reserve certain powers for the state government. Some powers will actually be shared between the federal government and the state government, but then a lot of powers will be given to the federal government. And in any kind of situation where there's a dispute between states or between the state government and the federal government, the federal law is going to be supreme when constitutional. And so, like, one example of this whole idea that the federal law is supreme, if you've heard about, marijuana being legalized in certain states, they're legalized in the state, but that's actually violating federal law. So the feds could go into those states and arrest people for violating federal law, even though those people think that they are following the state law. So that's an example of a time when this supremacy clause, where it gives federal law supremacy, would be an issue or would be considered. All right, issue number 4. So many people were still fearful of a central government that was too powerful. Remember, they just came out of this American Revolution where they were fighting Great Britain, who had a king, a whole monarchy that was taking away their rights. So they don't want that to continue. But they need a government that's still powerful. So what they do is they keep that idea of limited government that we see in the Articles of Confederation, and they continue that over into the Constitution. So for this slide, you're going to only write this box of information in, but you need to make sure that you save enough room, because on the next slide, we're going to add a little bit more to your solution box. So go ahead, pause, add this, but make sure that you leave enough room. Okay, so the idea of limited government is that the power of Congress was limited to those identified in the Constitution. These are called enumerated powers. So the powers that were actually explicitly written in the Constitution, the federal government has, and they can't do anything more than that. Okay, these are explicit things, explicit powers that they have, that are written in the Constitution. So you shouldn't have written all of this. You're only writing this box right there. All right, the other thing that you need to add is actually that in order to limit the government's power, they create 3 co-equal branches. So they establish those 3 separate branches, the legislative, the executive, and the judicial. And in that, they also give checks and balances among these branches to make sure that one branch doesn't become too powerful. So go ahead, pause, and add these 2 little bits to your notes, and then play again. Okay, so you can see down here, these are just some examples of what the different checks and balances are. So they're separating the powers so that they're not in the hands of all one person. Because remember, you know, back under Great Britain's power, they were having to deal with issues of the king himself having too much power and being a tyrant and just having this oppressive government. So what they do is they separate the powers, and then they make sure that one power doesn't become too powerful. So obviously there are checks and balances to even them out. So this is how they are trying to solve that issue of people being fearful of a central government. Okay, if you go down to our important people and what they did, you will see on your left-hand side you have James Madison. Now, in that box, I would actually write the little tiny box next to his name, James Madison. I would write down here what it says, Father of the Constitution. And then you can actually pause and add in the rest of this information for James Madison and the rest of this information for George Washington. And then play once you're finished. Okay, so James Madison, he is going to be a big leader. He leads the debates, and he's keeping a record of the meetings. He wrote the Virginia Plan, which we're going to go over in just a few minutes, and that is going to become the foundation for our structure of government. And later he's going to author a lot of the Bill of Rights, and so he's just called the father of the Constitution, and we probably wouldn't have the Constitution that we have today if it weren't for James Madison. Now, George Washington, if you remember, he was a leader in the American Revolution, and so he's kind of seen as a hero to a lot of the American colonists. So he's the president of the convention. He doesn't really participate. He presides over it, but his prestige kind of brings legitimacy to the convention. It makes people realize how important it is and that it is valid and legitimate because he's there and he is almost like a hero to the people. Okay, so they're both very important and instrumental to the convention and its success. All right, last slide. Go ahead, pause it to write in your information. You might not have enough room for this, so try to paraphrase and then play it again so I can explain it. All right. So I just was talking about the Virginia Plan. The Virginia Plan was created by James Madison. It's known as the Large State Plan. It actually creates a three-branch government. I hope that you did not write a four-branch government. I just mistyped that. With a bicameral or two-house legislature, but had the number of representatives based on population for both houses. That's called proportional representation based on population. So the Virginia Plan is a large state plan because it's all based on population. The New Jersey Plan is considered a small state plan. It was created by William Patterson, and it sought to amend the articles only. It wasn't completely revamping it. It was just trying to make some changes. So in this, it was going to create a three-branch government with an executive branch of 2 to 3 people, a judicial branch made up of a court that was chosen by the executive, and then it also kept the unicameral or one-house Congress with equal representation that we saw in the Articles of Confederation. So this was small states because everyone was still going to have equal representation in Congress. But as we know, because we've already talked about it, we have the Great Compromise. Sometimes they call it the Connecticut Compromise, so you might hear it called either one. This compromise was between the two plans, the Virginia Plan and the New Jersey Plan, and as we know, it creates a bicameral legislature with an upper house, the Senate, which is 2 senators per state, 2 votes per state, and a lower house, the House of Representatives, where representation is based on population. So I hope this helped you fill in your notes if you were struggling, and if you have any questions, make sure that you come and see me or call me over so that I can help you or help explain things any further.